Hi there and welcome back to another book review. Today we are talking about At Last by Marisa Silver. If you're thinking about checking out At Last for yourself, you don't have to worry about spoilers in this video. The first part of my reviews are always spoiler free, so you can see if this book is your cup of tea. After a quick summary and a basic review, I will give a clear spoiler warning before giving a full summary of the book and going into some of my thoughts and opinions. Here are some content warnings for At Last by Marisa Silver. At Last is a winding and complex story that shows how two families come together, and specifically through the lens of the relationship between the two grandmothers. The story begins with their children marrying and then leads us through the somewhat distant but somewhat competitive nature of their relationship with their family and with their granddaughter Frankie. Each of these grandmothers approaches their life with a different set of morals, beliefs, and purposes. This is the kind of story that focuses on exploring a family dynamic, but still manages to touch on so many other topics like mental health, feminism, marriage, sexism, and parenting. Before I give you my rating for At Last, let's do a quick run through of my rating system. 1 star means that I could not finish the book. 2 stars means I struggled to finish, but I did. 3 stars means the book was okay and worth reading. 4 stars means I liked the book and I would recommend it to a friend. And 5 stars, which is my highest honor, means I would read the book again. I gave At Last a 4-star rating because while I really enjoyed it and I would recommend it to a fan of contemporary fiction, I probably will not be reading this one again. If you read At Last and you enjoyed it and you're looking for some similar reads, here are some of my recommendations. First up is Last House by Jessica Shattuck. Just like At Last, Last House tells the story of a family through the generations. This one explores the idea of an eventual doomsday, and our characters confront the idea of what it means to be family with someone, especially when your morals and ideals don't line up with theirs. Up next, I would recommend Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This one is another family-centric story, but it has a little bit of a quirky twist, with it being centered around an intelligent octopus who helps to reunite two family members who didn't even know they were related. And last on my list of recommendations is Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. This is another family-oriented story, but this one focuses more on how wealth and class can play into those family dynamics. And this one also focuses on a set of women, but this time it's 3 younger, rich women instead of 2 older, middle-class women. Okay, so we are now entering the spoiler-filled part of this video. If At Last seems like it might be your cup of tea, now is a good time to click away, go read it, and then come back to see if you agree or disagree with some of my critiques. If you like the sound of this book, but you don't want to read it yourself, you don't have to worry because I will give you the full rundown. At Last opens with the wedding of Ruth and Tom, during which their 2 mothers, Evelyn and Helene, are running errands together. These 2 mothers are incredibly different, and we see those differences highlighted immediately. Evelyn is more practical, and Helene has more money. Evelyn smokes and drives a bit recklessly, and Helene wonders if this has anything to do with Ruth, her daughter, being something of a hippie. At this point in the story, both of the women are widows. Helene's husband was crushed by a tree in the driveway, while Evelyn's husband fought an illness for a while before eventually passing. Evelyn grew up on a struggling farm, and when she was a teenager, her mother took her and her sister off of the farm and into the city for a better life. While living in the city, Evelyn made up a fake job opportunity for herself, telling her mom that she would be going to be something of an assistant for this rich woman on the weekends. To actually make the money, she did homework for some of the other kids at school, and while spending these Saturdays out of the house, Evelyn ends up going to a hotel where a man there mistakenly thinks she's a sex worker. Evelyn goes up to his room with him, and after the man finds out that she's a virgin, she leaves. This is kind of presented to us as one of the significant traumas of her childhood. Helene, on the other hand, grew up as an only child because one of her siblings died of sepsis and the other one fell off a roof. People assumed that Helene would grow old and stay to take care of her parents, but when a random doctor propositions her with marriage, she can't really say no. This doctor is 10 years older than her, and together they end up having a son named Tom, who is the man getting married at the beginning of the story. After Helene's husband dies, she is going through his office and finds some old letters. They're all in German, and Helene hires a local grad student to come and translate them. That grad student ends up being Ruth, the woman that Tom eventually marries. After the translations are complete, Helene has to grapple with the reality of these letters, many of which sound like they're from a woman back in Germany asking the doctor for help to escape the country. It's clear from the letters that this Jewish woman has a child, and Ruth somewhat purposefully, or maybe on accident, translates one of the letters to read "the child" instead of "our child," maybe to try and help Helene since her husband is already dead, or maybe just as an honest mistake. Together, Ruth and Tom have a daughter named Francie, and Evelyn, Ruth's mother, moves to Cleveland to be closer to them. Both of the grandmothers spend time with Francie, but there's an undercurrent of competition between them to see who will get more of the girl's love. Later, when Francie is older, we see more of the grandmas in their own lives, such as Evelyn struggling with her love life and pushing away a man who has genuine interest in her. Meanwhile, Helene feels like she has no direction or purpose and tries to take like a self-fulfillment course at her local library. But while she's there, she ends up lying about an interest in Bach and finds herself questioning if the whole thing is even worth it. But she also ends up making an unlikely friendship with a man and his disabled son, and together the three of them go to the symphony. Meanwhile, as a teenager in New York, Francie is dealing with symptoms of OCD. It doesn't help that Tom and Ruth are getting a divorce, and eventually when she goes to college, Francie is just unable to cope. She starts to abuse substances and ends up on Helene's doorstep. Francie spends time with her grandma, who ends up bringing her along on a shiva to a Jewish temple. When things only end up getting worse for Francie, Tom and Ruth have to get her from college and bring her home. Meanwhile, Evelyn is in Florida and has broken up with her man. She has a little bit of a plot here where this little boy comes over to help her with cleaning and other tasks, and she notices after a while that little things start to go missing around the place. These are things like a half-used package of Kleenex or an old travel bottle of shampoo. When she goes to confront the boy's mother about it, and the mom sees exactly what these things are that he's been stealing, it's kind of an awkward exchange, and Evelyn never ends up seeing the boy again. As time continues to march on, Helene's memory gets worse and worse, and eventually she's diagnosed with dementia. During this time period, we have Francie and Tom in the house with Helene, and Francie ends up finding the letters. She asks Tom about what they could possibly mean, and Tom says that he doesn't have much information himself, only what Ruth had told him all those years ago. As Helene's dementia continues to progress, Evelyn comes to visit her in the hospital. Evelyn reflects on her relationship with Helene, considering the small pieces of the woman that she got to know over the course of their lives, such as the fact that Helene never wore a bathing suit, or that she would travel with the American flag in her suitcase. The last part of the story, which is told from Francie's point of view, comes after Helene's death. We see Francie and her partner just about to have a baby, and Evelyn is sick but visiting them. Evelyn, the smoker from the beginning of the story, ends up having lung cancer. We see generations of women all in the same room together. We have Evelyn, and then Ruth, and then Francie and her partner, and the baby that's soon to be born. We end with Francie thinking about her life in relation to her mother's and her grandmother's, and also thinking about the child that she's expecting. As Evelyn tells them stories, Francie reflects on the fact that people's lives can be so rich, and the amount that we learn about them through our conversations can only come close to like a slice of the whole picture. Alright, now that you know what happens in At Last, let's get into some of my thoughts and opinions on this book. In my opinion, At Last is an exploration of both womanhood and motherhood. We get to see both Evelyn and Helene in the context of who they were before becoming mothers and who they were after their children were old enough to start having their own children. By starting with Evelyn and Helene, we can kind of trace the path of their personalities down through Ruth and then Francie and see the deviation from the original design. This book feels like it's kind of like a nesting doll of ideas. Not only do we get broad strokes about family and motherhood and history and people as complex beings, but we also get to see other smaller issues within that, such as divorce and mental illness and sexism. For example, we have Ruth and her mother interacting during her marriage, where we see that they haven't always been the closest. And then when Francie is born, we see kind of the opposite effect, with Tom and Ruth being really doting on Francie, and still that ends up having its own consequences. Several of the characters in this book blame Ruth for Francie's mental health struggles. This kind of opens up a question for us as readers. Is it possible that a mother could affect her child that much? We also see that Tom is never really to blame for anything that goes wrong in Francie's life, even though he's the one who cheated on Ruth to cause the divorce in the first place. When held up to one another, Evelyn and Helene look like they could not be more different. I mean, they are the two things in this book that we are comparing as like the primary theme. But this is also an interesting case of when we hold them up, we see that they're actually more alike than we might think. I mean, in the end, they are two older women who have spent a significant portion of their lives living in Ohio, for example. They're both white and they're both from the same generation. And I think that ties back to the idea that we can have a general perception of who somebody is without really knowing all of the intimate details, which is kind of how Francie views both of her grandmothers in this book. She has a general idea of who each of them are without getting the backstories that we're privy to as readers, without knowing about Evelyn's sexual assault, and without knowing about Helene's experience of being married to the doctor for all those years. So let's touch on the topic of the letters. Of course, Ruth comes to Helene's house to translate these letters for her, and it's the catalyst for how Ruth and Tom end up meeting. And they reveal reveal that the doctor had a second family back in Germany. We are left to fill in so many of the details here, like whether or not he left them purposefully. It could have been a situation where he left and then planned to bring them back and then just couldn't. And it could also be a situation where it was always in his plan to abandon the life he left back there and come to America and try to completely forget about it. And of course, I feel like tying into the theme of not always having the full picture, we have the fact that if he had sent letters to this woman in Germany, they wouldn't be saved with the letters that he received from her. So we get kind of a one-sided look on what the situation might have been. We get a little bit of closure for this in the form of Tom and Francie finding those letters. But when I was reading through some of the other materials and reviews on this book, I noticed there were quite a few readers who felt like the letter plot was just kind of dropped or forgotten about. And my take on it is that I actually feel like it's somewhat of a stronger connection into the primary theme of this book. Kind of a game of telephone of who these people are and what happened to them. We have Francie hearing it from Tom, who heard it from Ruth, who looked at the letters, but still, even by reading the letters, doesn't get a full picture of what really happened. There's also this part of the book when Francie is living in New York with her parents. There's a window seat that she loves to relax in. And we learned that once a bird hit the window and Francie wasn't able to clean it off and had to sit there with the decomposing remains of the animal. Later, when her parents are separating, it turns out that there's a boy in the neighborhood shooting at her window with a BB gun, but Francie just assumes that it's more birds hitting the window until one night she finds a piece of ammunition on the floor. This moment, I think, highlights the trauma of her parents' divorce when she finds it and she calls out for her mom and her dad, but really only her mom is there because her dad moved out. When her mom comes running in to see what's wrong, she asks why Francie didn't tell them about this sooner, telling Francie that it's their job as parents to keep her safe. I really liked this moment in the book because I felt like it drew some parallels to later on when Francie is in college and she is once again in danger, but doesn't find it in herself to ask for help. All in all, I really enjoyed At Last, and I think you would too if you're a fan of contemporary fiction that focuses on families and specifically following those families through generations. If you are interested in picking up a copy of At Last for yourself, you can find my affiliate link in the description. You can also check out the description to see some of the books I might be reviewing next, and if there's a new release coming out that you'd like me to review, just drop me a suggestion in the comments. Thanks for watching.